Jesus tells us not to worry because worry is unnatural. Now, I want you to realize something about nature around us, okay? Nature doesn't worry. Have you noticed that? In fact, the only part of nature that worries is us as human beings. Nothing else in all of nature worries except people. So, for instance, you might be walking down the sidewalk and you see an anthill and you see a bunch of ants marching along the sidewalk and you look down at those ants. Are they worried? Not in the least. They're not worried at all. It's not like one of the ants look up at you and says, "Hey, I'm really worried today." No, ants don't worry. Okay? You might be out driving around and you're looking at some field, off in the distance, and maybe you see some cows. Maybe you see some horses out there in that field. Do they look worried to you as they're grazing, as they're lying around? Do those cows look worried? Do they say, "Hey, look at me, I'm so worried"? Those horses look really worried? No, not at all. Not in the least. Why? Because cows and horses don't worry. You might be out in your backyard and you're admiring your flowers. We've got all kinds of roses around our house, and my wife goes out and she looks at them, she talks to them, she picks them, and she always out there looking at those roses. Do those roses worry? Does she go out to the rose one day and say, "Boy, you really look worried today"? Not in the least. Those flowers, those bushes in your backyard, they are never going to worry. It's unnatural for them to worry. You might be out and about, and here in Norco and also down the 15 freeway, there's lots of big, gigantic boulders and rocks, and you might look, off the side of the highway and you see this big outcropping of rocks, and you might be thinking, are those rocks worried? No, they're not worried. Why? Because ants, cows, horses, plants, flowers, rocks, they don't worry. No part of nature worries. Jesus said it's unnatural to worry. Look at what he said in Luke chapter 12 and verse 24. He gives us an example of this. He said, "Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest. They don't save food in houses or barns. But God takes care of them, and you are much more valuable than birds." Listen, the birds in the air, as they're flying through the air, they don't have a worry at all. They're not worried in the least. And God says, Jesus says in this passage, if the birds aren't worried, why are you worried? You're more valuable than the birds. In other words, God's going to take care of you even better than the birds. That's amazing thing right there. Now, Jesus goes on and he gives us another example in Matthew chapter 6, verse 28 and 29. He says, "And why worry about your clothes? Look at the field lilies. They don't worry about theirs. Yet King Solomon in all his glory was not clothed as beautifully as they." So Jesus gives us another example. He says, look at the flowers in the field. Do they look worried? Are they worried about anything? No, they are so beautiful. They are beautifully clothed, he says. God takes care of them. They're even more beautiful than the clothing that Solomon had. Listen, we are more valuable than birds. We are more valuable than plants. And so Jesus says, worry is unnatural.